Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So after watching Tripolar Bear's video on corrupting fever and how he did it on a budget and running Delirium, I got really interested. I was like, I kind of want to play this build, and I just want to do some Delirium. I haven't done it in a while, so it's like, yeah, let's just go ahead and try this out. So I'm currently doing some divination Delirium thing. I don't actually know if this is very profitable, so I can't really recommend it, but the most of the money just comes from stacked decks, and I really like it because you only have really one thing to trade at the end of the day. Obviously, you have the bubblegum stuff from the Eldritch Altars and stuff, and you do get some cool div cards that you can sell as well, like just random drops, like I dropped a Nurse at some point. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a fun strat, and you can either open the stack decks, which is statistically very bad, but it's up to you. Obviously, if you find fun from opening them, then you might as well. Anyway, let's get back into the build. Now, I was like, how tanky really is this build? And once I actually started playing it, it's ridiculous. I went from level 98 to 99 without even dying. And yeah, it's just ridiculous. You can tag a lot of things, especially elemental stuff. The only weakness that this build has is bleeds, and you can easily solve that with a anti-bleed flask. But it's just annoying. I could really recommend the Malevolence Watcher's Eye that gives you bleed immunity. It would probably be worth it because yeah, bleeds are just really annoying on this build. But yeah, the clear is 10 out of 10. It's just really satisfying, explodes everything, and strong boxes get popped, breach gets popped, delirium gets popped, and it's overall really satisfying. Now, the only downside about this build, in my opinion, is that the single target isn't great. I even invested quite a lot into this build. It's not that it's very bad, it's just not great, and that's completely fine. A build doesn't need to have every checkbox ticked, and that's fine with me. And it's really good at what it does. It can absolutely obliterate these delirium maps, and yeah, as you can see, this build isn't even taking any damage. I don't have a shrine here, and I should have disabled it. But you know, it's still like, regardless, it's, take my word for it, it's very tanky. And with the delirium strat, what we do to make it even tankier and faster is to use the Nico nodes on the tree and use the shrines, and overall that makes the whole mapping experience really fun and really fast. So yeah, now I want to go into the build and into the overview. I'll quickly go and show you guys the boss. Alright guys, so this is the boss DPS coming up. Now this boss is actually pretty weak, so yeah, there's not really much to complain about the single target here, but yeah. Alright guys, so we're gonna get into the build now. I'm not gonna go too crazy on it because there's already a max roll guide on it, so you guys can go and refer to that. And I just want to show you guys the loot of the map quickly. So as you can see, primarily the rewards are the stack decks, and we got 81 in this map, which is actually the highest I've ever gotten so far. But as you can see, it's actually quite a lot, and this is like your main currency generator. Now I don't know actually if you're making a lot of profit off this, but it's really fun because you get random div cards too, and obviously they're not going to be good most of the time, but you do get some good ones. Like I dropped a Nurse not that long ago over here, and I also dropped this as well, 7 years bad luck. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So my build is pretty high budget at this point, and what I'd recommend for you guys is that if you are on a lower budget, just run 60% deli, and it's, you know, it's not as good, but it's still pretty good, and you can still, you know, do most things. It's just that the jump between them is quite a spike, and if you don't have the damage, most of the issue is a single target, and that's where the invest actually helps, because the clear is kind of good from a very early stage. It's just that if you don't have enough damage, your the rares and the uniques in your map are gonna be really difficult to deal with. So I would recommend trying to you know, do less deli depending on your investment. So I'll start off with the one. I just made this myself. There's a pretty good video on how to make something like this. Now the increased fizz on here is actually not doing anything because it's for local fizz, and that doesn't scale our damage. but it's just a mod I unveiled. I tried to get spell damage, but I didn't hit it, so that's that. And yeah, it's pretty standard. It gets the job done. This league, the imbued fractured ones are actually not very expensive. I think I bought my base for 4 div. And in previous leagues when CF was more popular, it was a lot more expensive. So it's pretty good, pretty cheap this league. Next we got the helmet, just something very simple. Haven't got an enchant yet, but yeah, it's pretty simple. It's a fractured chaos res, and I just put greed essences until I hit something pretty good, and then I crafted physical damage taken as fire damage, and then you got the implicits as well. We got Sappho's frame, also using that mod fizz taken from hits as chaos damage. Now this is really powerful, and the whole build revolves around taking chaos damage instead of elemental and physical. It's like using all of these things and using the fourth vow as well to make armor apply to chaos damage. So you're just really tanky. We don't go for spell suppress on this build because it's very hard to fit it in. And the reason it's really hard to fit it in is because on all our gear we need stats and we need resists. As you can see here, we have int, we've got int here, we've got this one doesn't have any, but it's got very high amount of resists, and obviously we need to cap our chaos red. It's very important for this build, and this is also heavy resists. This on the belt, I actually decided to go just for a huge life belt. It hasn't got anything other than life and a bit of resist that's actually meaningful. And as you can see on the boots, we also have a lot of stats. So we're really stat hungry for int and dexterity. It's really like a struggle to get this going on this build, and that is like the main issue. Now, if you want more damage, you can go for Skin of the Lords or you can go for Dialer's Malefaction, but you will be significantly squishier. So you need to keep that in mind. This whole build is using this fourth vow, and it's using it with Divine Flesh, and it's using it with the physical damage taken as chaos damage. And by doing that, you're actually becoming very tanky because you're splitting the damage and you're mitigating it a lot. And you will even see in PoB how much the fourth vow is doing. So if you try and take it off and use something else, like the Skin of the Lords, or you try and use the Dialer's Malefaction, you will see how much EHP you lose, and it's quite significant. So we also got this amulet. Now this amulet's actually really expensive to make, and if you get unlucky, it's going to be a big problem. The reason it's expensive is because you need to use imprints, and imprints are just going up every day because of the league mechanic. So I would try to buy this. If you wanna buy something like this, I would try and buy it rather than craft it. But obviously don't spend too much. If it's gonna cost too much, then you might as well obviously try and craft it yourself. I don't know if many people are actually making this amulet right now. But there's also a guide on how to make this amulet on Maxroll too. So I will leave the guide for this whole build in the description by TryPolarBear, and it's just a really solid guide. It's written everything down, what to do on a budget, the steps to improve your build. It's just a really good resource, especially if you're a newer player. So yeah, fourth vow already talked about that. The rings we just went for. So I got fracture suffix. Then I used the damage over time multiplier essence until I hit another desirable suffix. Like here, I hit intelligence, and then I did the tech where you do suffixes cannot be changed, veil chaos, unveil life, and then craft minus mana cost. Not very expensive to get this. The only expensive thing was this base. I think it was a couple divines or something. Because it's a vermilion ring, but if you change this for a coral ring, it will be so much cheaper. You can get like a T1 fractured lightning res coral ring for like 10C or something, so it's pretty cheap. And then you've got chaos res fracture here. Now you're probably wondering, why am I not using amethyst rings? And to be honest with you, I just didn't need to. I had so much chaos res that like so much res that I'm using and chaos res on my res that I didn't even need to use amethyst ring. So I was like, you know what, let's just go for coral ring and vermilion ring. And yeah, so a fractured vermilion ring with chaos res is actually really expensive, and to the point where I don't think it's worth it, so I didn't actually go for vermilion here, but you can do that if you want. And obviously if you're struggling with resist, go for a resist implicit, depending on what resist you're missing. Usually it's chaos res, so yeah. The thing you need to keep in mind is that we have a lot of max chaos res. As you can see, it's 84. So you need to make sure that you account for that, and you don't just go to 75. Make sure you go to 84 or whatever your max res is. There's not too much else to talk about the gear. It's pretty standard. I got this Abyss Jewel over here. Just got some life, and what's important about the Abyss Jewel is the phasing on kill. Now the Corrupting Blood is really nice, especially if you're doing Deli, because you get in situations where you're clearing multiple packs in one go, and if you're not careful or reactive with your Bleed Flask, you might just instantly die. And I will say this build's only weakness is degens. Degens are really terrible for this build, and you cannot deal with them. And if you get bled, you will notice it. And if you take any sort of poisons, you don't feel as much because obviously you have a lot of chaos res. But the only thing for me that I really feel about this build that it struggles with is bleeds. And I would be really careful when it comes to corrupted blood, because you do clear a lot of monsters in one second during a map. Obviously not all the time, but in some scenarios it's going to be a problem. But yeah, the gloves are standard. It's just some, resist life. I got Pierce here instead of the alt quality on KB. It's up to you what you want to do. You can go for Pierce on your gloves. If you can't fit it on your gloves, just go for the alt quality. But I believe the alt quality is a bit expensive. Last time I checked in previous leagues, it was really expensive, but I don't know any more about the price because I didn't need it. And then the boots, we did the same thing as we did with the rings. We got the fractured suffix. We rolled for avoid shock because we're using Storm Shroud. And with Storm Shroud, we're able to get full ailment immunity because we have 59% on the explicit and 41% on the implicit, which gives us 100% shock avoidance, which gives us our ailment immunity because of Storm Shroud. It's over here. So as you can see, modifiers to chance to avoid being shocked applied to all elemental ailments. So it gives us free, or not free, but it gives us elemental ailment immunity for a very low cost, which is usually very hard to get. I got really lucky with these boots and got Onslaught on kill, and now that allowed me to drop the Silver Flask, and I just went for a Sulfur Flask instead to get some more damage. But if you don't have Onslaught on the boots, you do need to run a Silver Flask if you want your movement and your attack speed to feel a bit smoother. So just replace the Sulfur Flask with the Silver Flask. And then quickly, the flasks are pretty standard, just evasion. I went for flagellants because we don't have much evasion on this build and we do get hit a lot. So getting your flasks up more is nice when you get hit. And it's just armor, move speed, and, attack speed here. They're not too important. And just make sure you run an anti-bleed flask because of the reasons I said earlier. Even if you have corrupting blood immunity, regular bleeds are still a problem, especially with the league mechanic. For some reason, this league mechanic inflicts you with so many bleeds, and I don't know why, but it's really annoying. But yeah, that's the gear covered. There's just some gems to go over, just Herald Purity, Blood Rage, Stormbrand. So what Stormbrand helps with is, when you're fighting a boss, it helps you keep up your Corrupting Fever buff, so you can move around if you can't just stand and reap. Because sometimes you can't just stand there and reap, it's really dangerous. So it's just that there for that. And then you've got Blood Rage makes the build feel really smooth. The frenzy charges and the attack speed is really important, so I'd really recommend using that as well. Then we got Molten Shell on left click, and something you'll notice, we have too many skills here. We've got I have to go to a different tab to press my vulnerability, which I actually do, by the way. On bosses, I actually do this because I've gotten used to it. But there's a lot of buttons here because we got Reap, Vow Reap as well. We've got a Corrupting Buff, we got Blood Rage, you got Kinetic Blast. Then you need your movement as well. Because I really like using Shield Charge with the movement skill, it takes up even more space. So it's a bit of a problem, but overall it's okay. Wall Banner, life tap to make sure this doesn't cost any mana, because as you can see, we only have 6 mana here, so that's why I put a life tap there. Then we got faster attacks, frost blink, and shield charge. Then we just got our body links. They're all maxed up pretty much. We got Anomalous Corrupting Fever 2120, Awakened Swift Affliction, Empower 4. This is a 2120 Val Reap, which is really expensive. And then you got a efficacy and awaken brutality. Then we got Malevolence with Enlighten, Pride, and Determination. Unfortunately, we have to use Enlighten here because we use the Vengeant Cascade Anoint, which doesn't allow us to use Charisma. And if we were to use Charisma instead, then we could drop Enlighten for another gem slot. So if you want to do that and you don't really want to use Vengeant Cascade, then you can. Vengeant Cascade isn't giving any damage to this build. All it's really doing is giving us some more clear, and it's really handy in the breach mechanic because it's a circular thing and the projectiles go behind you as well, so it explodes things behind you and it's just really smooth. You're probably wondering, how are you getting explode? I've gone for the really expensive option, and the really expensive option is going for the Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh. Now these are extremely expensive, and I honestly wouldn't recommend this. I think you should just go for the Haemophilia gloves and just look on the budget version of the build and see what they're doing there. But basically, you're gonna have to replace these gloves, and obviously you're gonna lose a lot of stats here, and you're gonna have to make up for it. So, say for example, you have to run Haemophilia, you're gonna have to drop these gloves, and you're gonna have to probably run Amethyst rings, at least one, because as you can see, this on these gloves I got Chaos Eraser. And on the belt you have options as well. You can put a lot of resist on here, so you've got flexibility if you can't run the gloves. But yeah, I just went for this because I was like, I kind of want to try this out. I have the currency to do it, and that's what I did. Finally, we have Kinetic Blast with Life Tap, Faster Attacks, and GMP. For bosses, you could switch in. You can take out Faster Attacks and GMP and put in Maim and something else. I can't remember what it was. Culling Strike, if you want. Something like that. Or you could run Culling Strike on Stormbrand if you have the space. But yeah, I actually didn't really bother with Culling Strike because I thought I'm not really doing any pinnacle bosses. I'm only doing map bosses and Kosis and the other thing. So I was just like, no point really doing any of that. Okay, now we'll briefly go over the tree. So we got two clusters here. We got the they're both exactly the same. They've got the same nodes, but we don't take Furious Assault because we don't have the points for it. I guess if I level up once more, I can take out this life node and go for the damage here. But yeah, it's not crazy amount of damage anyway. And then we got this Watcher's Eye. Just got the Malevolence on here. Now you can go for a defensive Watcher's Eye here instead if you want. It's up to you. And then obviously we got Storm Shroud to give us the ailment immunity. Then we got the just a standard jewel. Loads of damage on here. There's nothing really else to it. No life. If you were to get this jewel with life, it'd be quite expensive, so it's up to you. Obviously the Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh to give us the Explode. We got Unnatural Instinct, which is giving us a bunch of nice stats. Give us some cast speed, which is much needed with this build because we're casting Reap ourselves, and we're not exactly a caster. We're a champion. We're meant to be a melee, so our cast speed and our access to cast speed is very low. So this is really helpful, even though it's only 9%. It still makes a decent difference. But yeah, it's just giving some nice QOL. It's giving some stats. It's giving some damage, some regen, a bit of AoE. It's just really nice overall. So yeah. And then we've got this energized armor. It's actually giving us a lot of armor. So as you can see here, we've got 58k armor. If we take it out, we're at 46k, right? So it's actually quite a substantial difference. And obviously it's going to help when we use our Granite Flask. And then we have about 80k armor with our Granite Flask. And then yeah, that is pretty much the build, guys. I don't want to go too long into it because there's already a guide and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I really want to play CF because I haven't played it in a while, and I thought I might as well give it a go. And I saw Tripola's video on it, and I was really interested. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.